Our next guest says he doesn't think we are on the verge of a trade war with China. Nicholas Consonery joins us now. He is an Asia specialist at the Eurasia Group. He focuses on Chinese politics and economic policies. He is joining us from D.C. Nicholas, thanks so much for being with us this morning. $200 billion, the potential trade surplus figure between the U.S. and China. So does that increase the chance of trade tariffs against China or a similar punitive move?
Well, good morning, Deirdre. It's nice to be with you guys this morning. Look, I think there's no question that pressure on trade and on currency issues from the U.S. targeted at China is going to grow. What we have said is that we think trade tension in the U.S.-China relationship is the new normal in terms of U.S.-China relations. And in other words,
there's going to be a lot of back and forth, just a continuing conversation, and it's going to be tense for a long time.
Yeah, and we think it's something that both sides can manage. I think that's the key point. Clearly the Obama administration is more open to considering punitive trade measures against China, and clearly they're working to internationalize the renminbi issue and really, I think, in the lead up to the G20 summit in Seoul this November, try to make China's currency policy a more visible international issue that they can pressure China on.
Nicholas, so, I know you look at a lot of factors and all these moving parts when you're looking at the relationship between the U.S. and China, but since you mentioned the currency, we did see the yuan at a 2-year high yesterday. Some people are telling us the market is already pricing in compromise on the part of the Chinese as far as the U.S. and Europe go. What do you make of that?
I think that's right. I think Beijing is clearly aware of the kind of increased international pressure on the currency issue. And also, if you look at domestic economic factors in China, expectations are that consumer price inflation is ticking back up a bit. I think the consensus is 3.6% for September. So that's above the leadership's 3% goal for the year, and they can kind of use that domestic inflation number to sell a bit more rapid appreciation. But I think the key point is we don't expect a huge fundamental shift in policy, not enough that's going to satisfy the international critics, but that they will kind of slightly accelerate the pace.
Nicholas, we obviously talk a lot from the U.S. perspective when we speak from New York, but what about the issue from the Chinese perspective? I mean, this idea that for centuries foreigners came in, exploited China's natural resources, labor, etc. We could make a list. I mean, do you think Chinese politicians feel like they should flex their muscles when they can?
Well, look, I think what has changed in the aftermath of the financial crisis is that China is clearly growing in influence. It's growing in economic influence. It's growing in political influence. And I think there are voices in Beijing that are increasingly calling for the government, the Chinese government, to test the limits of that influence and to see what it gets them. And so I do think, Beijing is looking for opportunities, I think especially on regional disputes and regional issues, to press a bit more aggressively for their policy positions. And so we're going to see how that plays out.
Nicholas, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for the insights. Nicholas Consonery joining us there from the Eurasia Group.